Welcome to Turn Down for What, your source for EV news and updates. Like and subscribe on YouTube for more content like this episode. Let's dive on in. Welcome back to Turn Down for What. Another day, another episode. And today, I will apologize. We did not have an episode release this morning because we had the unique opportunity of hosting a special guest for a special topic today and wanted to make sure that we could bring him on and get the conversation accommodated, and figured a little bit later of a posting today would be appropriate for the news, getting some intel today on the topic, and then obviously having the wonderful ability to have Mr. Loren McDonald from EVAdoption on. Welcome to the podcast, Loren.
Welcome,
Great.
Lauren.
Thanks for having me on. Really excited and looking forward to talking about what we know about how the brain of Elon Musk works, right?
Now that's a multi-episode discussion. But what we'll do is we'll do a brief introduction of you and kind of what you do in the space as an EV leader, I would say, and kind of what your company EVAdoption does and anything else that you want to spotlight.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me on. Loren McDonald, CEO of EVAdoption, and really we're a data-focused company in the EV and EV charging space, and increasingly we're focused on the charging space. There's obviously a lot going on there, so that's been sort of over time become more of our focus. But basically, we track everything from EV sales to everything that's going on in the EV charging space, from deployments to, obviously one of the things we'll talk about today is like the NEVI program, utility incentives, utilization, like on and on. We're basically building what I'm calling a EV and EV charging competitor and market intelligence data center. So we're bringing all things data around EVs and EV charging into a single basically interface and data center. So very exciting, but a lot of work yet to be done. So.
Absolutely. Well, I can say as one of your subscribers, we are very, very grateful to have you as a resource to our business with Power Up America and all of the good intel that comes out. I mean, it's something that every business can hire a research and development team to go out and try to garner all of this data and to study different grant protocols and awards and patterns and habits, or you can join EVAdoption and it's all done for you.
Yeah,
and
it's all done for you. Yeah,
it's a gigantic resource for our business. We're very grateful to have that as an asset for us. And if you are at all interested in getting intel on the charging space, definitely go to evadoption.com and check out that service, because it is a gigantic use and benefit to us as a company. So anyways, thank you for the introduction, Loren. Today, we wanted to bring you on specifically to discuss a very huge topic that has occurred in the past 48 to 72 hours in the EV charging industry. And Jesse and I, as charging, leaders as well, running the space and trying to get
easy now
infrastructure. There's an assumption, but I'll put that tag on us. As people that are interested in seeing the charging space develop, the news that has kind of come out in the last 72 hours, I think, has taken the entire EV world for a spin, trying to understand the logic behind it. But in summary,
chaos.
Yeah, it's chaos. I mean, that really is all it is. I've seen nothing but just continual posts and feeds all over LinkedIn and all over the media platforms just about what happened. So to summarize, basically, Tesla and Elon specifically went through an additional round of cutbacks and ended up basically cutting and firing his entire supercharger team, which seems like, oh, he laid off a team, but they played such a massive role, and he didn't trim back the team. He laid off the entire supercharger team, everyone. And
reportedly 500 people.
Yeah. And this team of 500 people were responsible for all of the execution of new projects, maintaining current projects, and pushing forward into what this industry is. And as a preface, we saw, and this will be kind of a topic that we'll dialogue about today. We saw about a year ago a push begin to happen where EV adoption was beginning to take place, and the NACS standard got introduced. Jesse and I were actually the other day, we tuned back into the very first episode of the podcast, and that first episode of the podcast we were talking about is CCS dead, because Ford had come out with their announcement. We had talked to a couple charging station providers, and at that time, the conversation was, "Oh, we're not worried about it. CCS is here to stand." And we said, "I think something's changing." And on that first episode, we dialogued about that. And turns out in the upcoming weeks, as this topic developed, Tesla's standard, the NACS system, has been announced to be utilized into all of these systems. And Tesla has one of the most robust, it is the most robust charging solution in the world. And they are the number one seller of vehicles in the world. And so they were doing a lot to promote their installations, and they have a gigantic network, and they're doing a lot of expansion. And I'll let you kind of touch into some of the numbers that you want to share, Loren, but they were the number one award winner for the NEVI program to date. And all of a sudden, this gigantic news breaks that the entire Charger team is laid off, and all of their projects are on hold. So today I want to spend a few minutes kind of just bantering around this news, what the inferences are, what does that mean for the states that projects are announced in or haven't started in. But yeah, Loren, give us some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, if you just we can start with just sort of the NEVI aspect of this, and I'm sure most of your listeners are familiar with that acronym. But if they're not, it's the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. We all in the industry just call it NEVI, and it has a couple of different parts to it. But the part that we're all sort of mostly focused and interested in is the $5 billion from the federal government that's allocated out to the states, plus DC and Puerto Rico, and it's an apportionment thing. So they use a formula that I think was developed in like the 40s or something like that, 40s or 50s, that determines how much money each state gets every year from the Federal Highway Administration. So they basically leverage that formula to carve up the 5 billion, and it's actually not 5 billion, it's about 4.2 billion, because the joint office and other people have to use some of that money to pay their salaries to run the program.
$800 million. Yes, continue.
Yeah. I may be off a little bit of that number. I think it's like 4.19 that's actually being allocated, something like that. But and so just as an example, Tesla, Texas gets 408 million, California gets like 398 or something like that. And then, Puerto Rico, DC, Rhode Island, they get like a few million, 5 million, a couple million, and everybody in between. And then that money is basically being then distributed via competitive grants that most of the states are doing. Not all the states are doing it that way, but most of the states are. And so to bring it up to date, Tesla has so far won the most awards. So they've won 69 individual site awards across 10 states. There's some other companies like Francis Energy that have won in more states and more money. They're second, but Tesla has won the most awards. And last week, Massachusetts announced 4 finalists for their program, but we don't yet know how many sites are going to be awarded. We won't know that for a couple of weeks, and so I'm sure we'll dive into this. But like, what does that mean for those states that are still scoring, like the RFPs that include Tesla? Like, what does that mean? And I don't know that I'd want to be those people at the state DOTs and procurement offices that are scoring Tesla right now, right? But so fundamentally, to sum it up, Tesla has done exceedingly well. Their costs are typically about half. Their application proposals are typically about half the average of everybody else. And so that, they do well on the scoring when it comes to cost, and they obviously do well on scores around things like the team and experience and, hardware and technical and all that kind of stuff. Where they sometimes fall short is most of the states have a category in their RFP scoring called site amenities or something like that. Or yeah, it's something like that. They use various terms and stuff. And depending on who Tesla partners with, right, from a site host perspective, since Tesla is not a site host, right?
Yeah.
They, as opposed to like a Pilot or a Love's, or somebody like that who is both an applicant and a site host, right? They may or may not do well, but overall, they have been killing it, right? They've been doing really well, as you would expect they would. They're approaching 30,000 fast charging ports, right? Like they will deploy, assuming they keep on their current pace, they will deploy, and which obviously is what we're going to talk about because we don't know. But if they
Question mark.
yeah, if they stick at the current pace, they're on pace to do about 6,100 ports this year, right? And about 500 stations. Like they do more ports in a month, right, than like pretty much everybody else does ever.
Yeah.
Right, I'm exaggerating a little bit there, but most than everybody, right? Like and and just to put NEVI in perspective, Tesla opens more ports each month than the NEVI program. Or they open more ports in like 3 months than the NEVI program will do it in its like lifetime kind of thing. I mean, it's that sort of magnitude. So to bring it all back, when you think about that sort of magnitude of Tesla and the fast charging space and NEVI and these programs, if they have basically deleted their team, right, and start to slow down and pull back, that's a massive hit on the expansion of this fast charging industry. Now,
Yep.
I'm sure we'll get into this, but there's a lot of other companies looking such as yours, looking to step in, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's amazing that they have all of this momentum. I think that's what took the industry by such a surprise. They have all this momentum, all of these awards, they're opening all these ports, and then the entire team gets laid off. And Elon puts on X, Tesla still plans to grow the supercharger network just at a slower pace for new locations and more focus on 100% uptime and expansion of existing locations.
Yeah, and I think that was like over the course of the last 36 hours, like everybody, I've been trying to make sense of this, and my thought process has evolved, but that tweet, really sort of took me to sort of another level of thinking. So I don't know if you want to sort of just jump in on that and that comment, but
it's a curious tweet, because it's not like their uptime isn't already 99, and it's not like, and I've seen some sites, and there are some sites where they have already pre-trenched where they know they want to add for expansion in the future, but that's not the case for most of them. Most of them are not that way. So I kind of felt like he was trying to figure out a face-saving tweet to make some sense out of something that made no sense.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, that's just a, hey, guess what? We're still working, but I fired the whole team, and this is my way to save face. Understanding the brain of Elon, that's going to be a topic that we have to discuss.
Maybe he's gonna take some engineers from X and SpaceX and assign them over there, right? Like that's what he's done in the past. Apparently, he's moved people around. I'm not being serious, of course, but yeah, Chris, no, it's interesting that you brought that up, because that was like the 100% thing. I'm like, wait a minute, Tesla already claims to have a 99 point, I forget what it is. I don't know if it's 0.8 or 0.1, but it's like 99 point something. They already are acknowledged and recognized as having the best uptime and reliability, and so why would he even bring that up? Like, nobody is even close to you. Like, there are charging networks out there that are in the 60 and 70% level, and and 80% and low 90s. But so that Chris, I agree with that. That was sort of a bit odd, and maybe somebody, if he had a PR team, maybe somebody on the PR team would have written that for him. But
Elon has proven to be a loose cannon,
Yeah.
and it seems like in this situation that might have been a scripted save. I who knows? I mean, the things that we're hearing since that tweet is kind of what's indicative to me that there's a large upset occurring. And we talked about this just for a minute before the podcast went live, but there's contractors and utility individuals that have deals with Tesla that are reaching out to their contacts saying, here's the update, and the email's bouncing, and the email's coming back saying, please reach out to this person. So they reach out to that person, and the email bounces because the whole team's gone. And today there was an announcement in New York that several of the planned sites that were in place in New York have been canceled. And so really, like, the amount of shift that's taken place in the last 48 hours, I think literally in that tweet when it says we're going to focus on expansion of current infrastructure, I think that they literally are going to cut all new acquisitions out of the picture, and they're going to look heavily towards, now let's get the sites that we have done and move on. Because to me, it doesn't seem like we're going to see any other positive like new spaces open. And you mentioned with the states that are under review of applications, Kentucky just closed the window, and I'm sure that there was some second round applications we were applying. But Tennessee, that we were awarded in, hasn't issued their contracts yet, and we are aware of Tesla having a site that was awarded in the Knoxville area. And will they sign the contract? I mean, there's nobody to sign the contract.
Who do you send it to?
Yeah,
who's going to sign it? Yeah.
So will that contract come through, or will that site have to be awarded to somebody else? And that's the question. I mean, Tesla has an award, but not signed the contract. And I know they haven't signed the contract because the state hasn't issued the contracts.
Right,
so what does that mean for the state that's still not even into a contract phase? Because they were already kind of upset about some of the regulations in the state of Tennessee. So like, how does that implement itself into conversion? Will they want to meet all the NEVI requirements? Because like you said, they're deploying so many ports, they don't need NEVI. NEVI, I think, was just a supplement for free money that they could get while they were free money for
them. Yeah.
But it required things of them that they don't have to do with other deployments, which is the federal reporting and some of the other reimbursement
payments.
It takes a team to do that. It's not something that one individual can run. So my question is, does that mean that they don't take on any other NEVI applications, or will they actually complete that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's so much to unpack there, right? One, which is, in addition to the Supercharger team being laid off, the public policy team was laid off, right? And as you guys know, doing a NEVI application is a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work, and you're laughing there, Jesse, but I know that's those are tears. Those are tears, sweat and blood. But so if so like trying to like deconstruct Elon's tweet and whether he's telling the truth or not, or what's true and not there, and the reality of, like, well, if you have nobody on the team to actually submit and produce, the application, like, you're going to outsource it? And certainly there are firms out there that do, like, submit applications to states and things like that. So that's possible, but somebody still has to approve it. And, and so that, that idea of going forward, my guess is no. Right, like that going forward, they will not submit any new applications because there's nobody to do it. Which then brings us, to kind of back to your point around like existing ones. And if we take Elon for his word, then we would assume where they have agreements with the state, where they've already won an award and they have a signed agreement with the state that they're going to proceed. I mean, again, we're just pulling stuff out of the air here. Nobody knows, but my assumption is they will move forward on those. They have one of the things that people may not know is while Tesla had this big 500 person team, they also fundamentally used hundreds of contractors and vendors out there to do the actual construction and deployment and all that type of stuff. So those companies still exist and can continue to construct and build and deploy.
Our contractor team that we has deployed a few Tesla sites.
Yeah. So that part of it, I can see how it can get done, but who's going to pay their checks? Who's going to hire them? Who's going to sign off on approvals? Who's going to select them? Right? Like that's sort of the unknown. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
When I'm like you, I kind of live here in the Bay Area, so I have a lot of people that have worked for Tesla for years. Both up kind of past your area in that Tracy market, and then some in Palo Alto and some in Fremont. And I've, first of all, I reached out to them just to see how they were doing, make sure they were okay. And I'm fortunate that the folks in my orbit still are there. But all of them to a person were shocked. Like this wasn't something that strategically was communicated or thought through within a broad area of Tesla. If there are people that know the strategy here, it's a very small group that does. And there are people that I know that are in areas that would be involved if there was a strategic shift here that was planned ahead of time. And the sense of it is that as he's wont to do sometimes, he has that aspirational bent to him where he will throw an aspiration out that has not even started. And then it's up to the team to catch up to that aspiration. And, a big thing, like with his tweet, he talked about Tesla was going to lay off at least 10%. People kind of held on to that idea that 10% were being laid off, but it's branching beyond that. It said at least 10%. And the sense was that this might have been a group of people he was frustrated with, whether it was about, V4, dispensers being out, but no real V4 chargers. You've got, Cybertruck that doesn't even charge to its maximum capacity unless you're out there on an EA. There's a number of factors where maybe the team wasn't working with the urgency and fervor and direction that he thought, and he just wiped him out, man. He just wiped him out. And then in that way, he's almost like, okay, now I've done this impulsive thing. Now I'll set it out there. I'll on the fly come up with a strategy that makes some type of tangential sense. And then everybody will go in this direction. And they have very smart people at Tesla. They have project managers that may not project manage charging, but they project manage any number of a dozen other things, and they're going to shift people and add responsibility, and somebody will get paid in accounts payable, and it'll be ugly, it'll be messy. They'll have to learn as they go, and Tesla, as they always do, will they famously like to move fast and break things, and they sure as heck did it here. And they broke something that you would like to think didn't need necessarily fixing. It just needed some. I think that's what's most surprising is if you wanted to wipe out maybe your top management, and then redeploy somebody that was better aligned with your strategy maybe, but man, he just took them all out. And I think they're going to be scrambling and working hard. Famously, they set up a tent. He slept overnight. They had production hell. They're going to do that to the charging team. They're just going to have that type of, long days, 6-day weeks, working all to trying to catch up and make sense of this. And the poor people that are there to pick up the pieces are going to learn as they go, and they will, because they're incredibly smart and incredibly talented. But as of today, nobody that I talk to has any idea where this came from or how it's going to happen. They just know it will, because that's what Tesla does.
Well, I'm going to throw my 2 cents out on this deal because I'm looking at this from a completely different view. So Tesla is a car company. They created the charging network because it didn't exist, not because that is what their business model is. So they went in to build these charging stations and did a fantastic job of it. I also look at this and think, okay, for Tennessee, there are going to be 32 quick charging stations that will be built across the state. And when I look at what we're doing, we're going to have 2 400 kVW systems that will have a CCS and a NACS connector without an adapter. It is a bespoke system that I can charge at up to 400 kilowatts. So that's better It's going to be covered. It's going to have bathrooms. That is so much higher than what Tesla's producing today. So if I'm already doing it, why would they need to go ahead and do it? So if it allows them to focus just on making the cars because people like us are creating the systems finally that he can use, then maybe that's the other objective here. He's done thousands and tens of thousands, and I can understand taking a good thing and running with it, but he also has to answer for a turn down in the market. He also has to make sure, today that we're talking about the molding systems that they use is not going to be as robust. They're not going to use as much as that giga molding as what they were going to do. Obviously, the Cybertruck has had some issues. Great point on the charging aspect of it. You would think that your charging team would say, hey, today we know cars of the future, 2 years from now, whether it be Porsche or anybody, or even F-150s, are going to an 800. Yeah. So why have they not even considered making a 800? When I look at their other one, it was, hey, we're going to save money and go into a parking lot. If you're investing, you invest in your own infrastructure. They had the money to go in strategic locations, and some they bought the property. But if you're creating an opportunity, that's going to give you long-term value. So this might have been him just saying, hey, I'm done with it. These people are not doing what I asked them. They did not take my goals and make it something better than everybody else. And today, our stations are not built yet in Tennessee, but I would put ours up against any Tesla station on what we provide compared to what they have. And I feel like we would have a better today item. Now, it's not because they don't have greatness in them. It's because we are so much further along in time that our investments are today. Theirs had to be for long-term strategy. So it might just be, hey, we know we've got 30 or 40 large superchargers going across every single state. We really don't need to build our network no more. It's done. We'll build some of it out, but our goal is to build cars better than everybody else. Let's start focusing on that and let everybody else take it.
And just to back your point, a lot of states like Alabama and Kentucky and some of the ones that we've been looking at are mandating NACS be added, have both CCS and NACS added as ports. It's a mandation, not even adapter based. You have to have the actual cabling, which is limited on the charging station solution. But that's something that, a lot of states are pushing that as a mandation. I think that that's going to continue to roll out in new RFPs.
Yeah, I want to go back to, something that you sort of said and started with, because this is sort of where I started to come down on this, which is, what a lot of people don't understand is that Tesla got into the charging business, both the supercharger and its level 2 destination charging business, not to be in the charging business. Elon didn't want to be in the charging business. They got into it for one reason and one reason only, is that they knew, especially starting back in 2013 in the early days, the only way you can sell EVs is if people are confident that when they get in their car and drive somewhere, they'll be able to charge. And so you have to build out a ubiquitous, fast, in the case of DC fast charging, and then on, the destination charging at every hotel you go to, there's a, level 2 charger, et cetera. And so Elon knew the calculus was every charging station I build equals more sales of Tesla Model 3s, Model Ys, Model S's, Model X's. And that worked for 10 years. It didn't work this quarter.
Yeah.
This last quarter, it didn't work. Right. And I think, and again, nobody knows how the brain of Elon Musk works, but one of my theories is that, when he or his team of, MBAs, et cetera, started crunching all the numbers and looking at the costs, they realized, we spent, X hundreds of millions of dollars last quarter on new superchargers in the US, and our sales went down. Right. So wait a minute, that calculus of our whole vision behind this of build it and they will come, meaning more chargers, more sales, stopped working.
Yeah, I think it's easy when you're in growth mode and essentially your loss leader of superchargers is a rounding error.
Throw them out there. It's free money, right? Like we just keep building them, right? And that's what took everybody by surprise. Like, we're sitting here, I'm looking at the numbers. I've got a database. I'm tracking, every new port and charger that's opening, and you're just going, Tesla's just doing this, right? And everybody else is doing this. And we just all assumed it would keep going. And I think, what may have happened is, just as I said, like, you realized, maybe we don't have to do this anymore. And combined with, you have the NEVI program throwing out money. You have Iona, the 8, OEM charging network. You have the Mercedes-Benz network. You have the Walmart network. You have Circle K, 7-Eleven, Love's, Pilot, BP, Phillips 66. Like, you go down the list, right? You've got all of these companies that are like, oh, we have convenience stores, we have restaurants, we have a whatever. And sales of gas is starting to peak and decline. Oh, guess what? People that come and charge will sit there for 20 to 45 minutes. And if we do our business right, they will walk into the store and spend $15 on a $4.50 cup of coffee, a couple of bags of chips, lotto tickets, and a sandwich, right? Or increasingly, at these convenience store chains, they have like gourmet restaurants inside, right? And salad bars and stuff. So their ticket, of what they spend is huge. And so part of this is, my thinking is that the ROI, the economics, the calculus of at a station sells more EVs, like, went away, combined with, he's like, we've built almost 30,000 ports in the US. We did our share. It's time for everybody else to step up to the plate. Like, we're handing it off. We're going to continue to add more and maintain and do all these things. But like, the rest of the industry needs and is stepping up to the plate to sort of fill it out. So we're not going to spend our time and money going out and putting a supercharger in the middle of the desert or in the middle of Montana. What we will do is, in Santa Monica and Palo Alto, we'll take our 16-port supercharger station and we'll turn it into a 32 or a 40, right? And we'll put a awning and solar panels, and we'll partner with a restaurant. Like, I think, if we take Elon's tweet, which is dangerous, right? Literally, on at least on the part about we're going to focus on existing, I actually buy that, right? Like, that's the part of the tweet that I think I get and makes sense. Like, because you think about it, he has to start to be concerned once all these Mustang Mach-E's and Hyundai Ioniq 5s and Mercedes EQBs and stuff start showing up to charge at superchargers in volume. He has to be concerned that he's not pissing off the Model Y drivers, that they're waiting for 20 minutes for a stall, right? So what do? Where the volume is and the utilization is, you just keep expanding that. So you stay a step ahead of the charging sessions and stuff. So, again, could be completely wrong, and none of what I say it ends up happening, but that's kind of the theory level on this.
Yeah, and I mean, you can look at the dollar investment for new infrastructure, but at the same time, I mean, just generic numbers, they're probably running a $60 million a year team to operate these charging stations on top of, everything. And they have enough of a network. If you take his tweet for his words, it's one of those things that, I mean, they can, the bottom line will grow $60 million because they don't have this massive team going out and trying to find creative ways to be competitive with a nationwide network of people that, like you were saying, all these different competitors coming to chomp at the bits. Perfect the stations that you have and don't have 500 people, and you're going to save $100 million in staffing that would have been, required to continue to push the ball forward to, like you're saying, it's not going to more beneficially increase car sales. And then you're just basically trying to find which little tiny corner of which rural area can you get a little bit of money here and there. And yes, the free federal dollars are great, but $100 million a year of payroll is also a big chunk to pay on an investment that may not be returning itself with that size of a team.
Yeah,
But
so
that
let's,
Easy
has
for me
a
to
low
spend.
charging rate.
yeah.
Easy for me to spend Elon's money, but 100 million is just nothing at the scale of what they're doing. And
That's true.
And even the idea of kind of expanding, if you look at those New York sites you mentioned, I mean, New York is famously one that is bottlenecked badly. And they had a whole study and a commission that identified those are the areas they needed to expand. And those, if anything, those were ones that really needed to move forward. And so I can't see an alignment anywhere with this stuff. And I think that what worries me about all the rest is when I thought about transitioning to EV, a big part of that was just my absolute disdain for oil and gas companies and the way they operate. And especially out here in California, and Loren, you know this more than anybody, you got summer blend, you've got, there's always a reason, right? There's always a reason. The refinery in Martinez is under some kind of maintenance. The one in Richmond is right, did something. There's always a reason. And next thing you know, it's $7 gas and they manipulate it. And look, you go look at, Josh and Jesse, you were out there at the Pilot Flying J. That was, 70 cents or something ridiculous. In Tennessee, what are you talking about? 70 cents in Tennessee. I can go down here to the Supercharger in Newark by the Dumbarton Bridge, and I can pay less to charge than I can pay from PG&E right now. And Tesla is committed. Now, I'm not saying that's a good idea. Maybe that's part of the problem, right? But when I look at what I pay as a member when I go to charge at a Tesla station, it is traditionally lower than the competition, especially if you're looking at time of use rates and you're strategic about when you charge. And they're about the mission. They're dedicated to the mission, and more than just throwing some chargers out there at a location with some great amenities, which is great when you first open it. What they're committed to is maintaining them and doing it at scale. Because they're not just doing 4 locations somewhere. There's 22 of them over in Newark. There's at least 8 in most of the locations. And so it's one thing to put 4 there, but 4 is not 8 and it's not 12 and it's definitely not 22. And then it's another thing to put it in there for the first couple of years of NEVI. And it's a whole nother thing 5 years from now, or where Tesla is now 10 years from now, to then still have a 99% uptime because of your dedication to the mission and the infrastructure and the hardware. And so do I trust Shell Recharge and BP and Electrify America, whose only existence is because they were liars and cheaters on the emission standards, right? Do I trust?
Wow. Tell me what you really feel.
Right. Do I trust them to be responsible stewards of the EV transition, or do I trust them to find some way to manipulate the market, conspire to have high pricing? And you need Tesla to be that person whose profits are not based on being a CPO, who they need that loss leader. Like, I worry as just a fan of EVs that this is a tough moment, because this allows all these other folks that are dabbling in it. And I'm sure the teams that do it are committed, that they've hired, but the folks outside of that team and these giant corporate, they don't care about EVs or the mission. They want to, you look at the pricing on some of these places they're always out of alignment, and they're crazy numbers. And Tesla's really good about having stuff that works for a long time, stuff that's elegant and easy to use. They are the Apple of EV charging, right? There's a reason, and you need that, and you need it to be reliable. You need it to be predictably priced. And so I just worry about that. I worry about it, and I hope Elon figures this out and gets back on track with it. I don't know what it'll look like, but man, if we're turning it over to BP and Shell and
Power Up America, baby.
Well, Power Up America, come on, let's get you guys out there. We need more of you and less of Shell and BP. Like, I just recoil at the idea of pulling into a Shell or a BP.
That's fair. Well, I mean, I think
like
the
Shell,
next couple weeks will be pivotal for the industry as a whole, and what that looks like for Tesla. I mean, obviously this announcement comes fresh, but they could have a whole new rollout of a plan announced, that we're all unaware of, just like this took us by surprise. There could be a whole, like, oh, look, we launched this new division that's going to be dealing with their charging acquisitions.
Hydrogen.
Jesse. Joshing is hydrogen. Yeah, they're going to release something, Josh. They're literally making it up now.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Like the accessories on the Cybertruck that we saw, and like the battery. Like if they talked about, remember there was the range extender battery, right?
Aspiration.
I was talking to somebody and we all agreed that literally looked like 24 hours before Elon said, "Oh, people are going to give us crap about the range of the Cybertruck." And so somebody come up with a CGI of like a battery that'll slide into the back, right? And then we've heard nothing about it since, right? But
You have to take it to a supercharger. You have to take it to a maintenance center to get it installed and removed because it's so heavy.
yeah,
you can't even put it in yourself. From
yeah, they didn't even sort of really go there on that part. But I want to go back to since we're getting crazy here.
My rant.
Yeah, and that was a little uncomfortable for me because many of those companies are my clients. If any of them listening, I did not necessarily endorse Chris there, but at any rate, had to get that in. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is Elon, we've got 8.8, we've got like, I don't think he cares. So I think, Jesse, you mentioned about he's a car company. I think he would throw up hearing you say that. Like, I don't think Elon wants to be a car company. He doesn't think of his, his car
He's
company.
a technology company, honestly. That's what he is. He is a technology company.
On his earnings call, he went out of his way on his earnings call to say that if you think of us as a car company, don't invest in us. That's not what we are.
Yeah, I remember. But I think he's bored with cars. I think he's absolutely bored. He sees the Chinese are going to kick his butt. That he's not going to be able to compete at that level. Everybody else will eventually get their act together, and it's just metal. He's motivated by solving impossible problems and projects, and he's all in on AI. And so I think the robo-taxi gives him the ability to sort of combine cars, right, with AI and the technology, and that's always been his thing. But if you think about if he truly believes that he's going to have this fleet of 5 million vehicles out there that are overnight going to be robo-taxis, which is like not true, because I'm not going to turn my Tesla into a robo-taxi, so I'm not part of that number, Elon. Because I don't want some college student throwing up in the back of my car on their way home from the bar, right? And I don't think a lot of people are going to want to do that. But at any rate, if he truly buys into that, maybe the expansion of the supercharger network going forward is he's going to put in wireless charging at the supercharger location. Like, if he truly believes in his vision and that going forward there's going to be these millions of Teslas that are robo-taxis, well, how the hell are you going to charge them?
Well, part of that, part of what I've heard, with who heck know, you hear a lot of things from a lot of people, is that robo-taxi thing. Part of that, it needs to be the wireless charging, and that he wasn't also happy with the progress on the wireless charging, because that's kind of pivotal to that robo-taxi idea, because it needs to drive itself to a pad that wirelessly charges the way our phones could if it was on a pad, and that was a component of his displeasure.
Yeah, and they acquired a German company, and apparently I heard the other day actually that then they, like, I don't know, they kept the technology but then sold the company or something. I'm not sure about that, but at any rate,
pieces to it, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, we know that, and I've worked with several of the wireless charging companies, so I know that space pretty well, and it's emerging, but it's a real chicken and egg thing, right? Like, you've got to have the coils on the cars, and so you got the automakers to do that, and then you got to have the inductive coils out in the ground somewhere for people to charge at. And neither one exists yet, right? Neither one exists yet, right?
Well, so I will say this: on the 30th of last month, is it last month? Yeah, we're on the 1st now. So on the 30th, I was on a Office of Technology Transitions meeting for the national labs, and it was about polyphase wireless power transfer systems. So that technology, it was a very good oversight on what they're looking at doing for the national labs, and they had examples, they had models that were working. So I'm thinking that that could be one of the pushes. Now, the transfer rate is not even 150 kilowatts. So you have a lower transfer rate. But like you said, if you could like go through drive-throughs, or if you're picking people up, or if you have slower areas and you could transfer over, it appeared, at least on what I watched, that that is possible. So maybe you're correct in the idea that they're saying, look, we're not going to go for a 400 kilowatt system because we don't believe that in the next 5 years that's where the systems are going to be. This is what we're doing. The team that I was running, they would not be able to adopt. So I went ahead and just cut them out. We're going to build a team around this new technology. That is a very viable thing I could see somebody doing.
Every time
Yeah,
you go
yeah.
and see like a fast food restaurant now, they're telling you to pull up to spot number 3 and they bring the food over to you. You throw that thing into spot number 1 through 5, and while
Yep.
you're waiting for your food, you're charging. Or when you're at Target,
Yeah, I mean,
my wife
there's
sends me to Target pickups all the time. You're sitting there at the Target pickup charging. That'd be
yeah.
kind of
So
ideal.
yeah, so one of the companies I've worked with is Induct EV, and they're focused on the commercial space and having a lot of success with municipal buses, like transit buses and stuff. And
Yep.
so, they're all custom electric vehicles. And so to add on the coil for X thousands of dollars is just, it's just part of the cost for a $300,000 bus, right? And then those transit agencies just deploy the inductive coils allow on the routes of the buses, right? And so, but in Sweden at one of the airports, I forget which one it is they've partnered with a taxi company. And so, Chris, it's kind of to your point, is as the taxis move forward one space at a time, right, towards picking up a fare, it's just hovering over the coil, adding like a couple of miles, right? And
Yep.
so by the time they get up there and pick up their passengers, so ultimately the point, bringing it back to Elon and this is that you could see that being sort of part of his grand plan of on 8.8 rolls out that yeah, here's where we're at with the robo taxis, and by the way, you're probably all wondering how they're going to charge. Well, we have 3,000 supercharger stations in the US, and we're going to drop in pads at them, right?
Yep. And I will have to say this, I have to do a shout out. That's Oak Ridge National Labs here in Tennessee that is doing that, and it's 50 kilowatts. I just had to look it up, but that is
50's rough.
ORNL up here in the mountains that came up with what they're working on. Fantastic program. And you could be right. Maybe that is the next step of it. So who knows?
I mean, there's so much movement in so many different spaces that I don't think anybody really knows. I mean, the amount of evolution that happens in this space from month to month is, it's always evolving, always changing. Like I said at the beginning of this, there was, all of the major charging station providers were like, oh, we're not worried about NACS. It's only going to be CCS. And 1 year later, it's like CCS is fading quickly and states are changing their policies. But what if hydrogen becomes a thing? Or what if we see wireless charging? I mean, there's so many what ifs. It's just a matter of how you execute and have stations that are future proof. I mean, that's another topic that's been in a lot of the state RFPs for NEVI is future proofing. And that's one of the things that I think we have to go beyond being short-sighted enough to say, hey, let's stick 150s in parking lots to push out federal dollars. We have to look at higher charging speed of capabilities in vehicles with 800 volt and higher charge speeds. We have to look at future expansion capabilities for more chargers, wireless chargers, hydrogen dispensing. All of those things have to be factored in. And then, the other thing that we look for future proofing is how do you protect the grid with increased EV adoption? And, those are all pieces that I feel like, going back to Chris's point, some of the gas station models are short-sighted on. They're just saying, hey, we're going to get infrastructure slapped in a parking lot because that's free federal dollars. When at the end of the day, there has to be consideration for future proofing, because this industry is changing so much that having a charging station that can add NACS in the future and can have a new cable in the future and can go to higher speeds or have more expansion, which is something that these states are looking for, I feel like is a priority, because there's federal dollars here. I don't know how soon it's going to be before we see another bucket of funds like this extent
Ever.
to push out something like
Never.
this ever for the EV charging space. And so that's something that I think that with the funding that's there, we have a good shot at doing it right. And it's important to make sure that we are really considering the protection of the future, which could be wireless, hydrogen, and some of these other things.
Loren, when Josh talks about the future, though, and what I'd love to hear your take on this, I think of the Tesla, they've won all these NEVI contracts. Who knows where they'll go? But where do you sit on the debate between if they even meet the requirements when it comes to voltages, right? Because there are definitely two different camps, and I don't know enough to really know how I feel about it. I understand how both read it the way they do, that it's supposed to support voltages between X and Y, and it now, some people say that when they say it should support between X and Y, that it means it should that entire range between X and Y, which clearly Tesla doesn't do.
Doesn't do.
Versus it must fall somewhere within the range of X and Y, but to future proof, and if for the Cybertruck itself, Lucid, the Kia vehicles, they can't charge it the way they're supposed to, because none of the Tesla stations will currently do that. And when you talk about future proofing, the Ford stuff is all supposed to be that 800 volts. Where do you stand on that when you read NEVI and you work with NEVI? Where do you fall?
So there's two aspects to what you said. One is exactly as you articulated, that sort of it's 250 to 920 volts, right? Is sort of the requirement. And FHWA came out with an update correction, which only confused everybody more because the wording, just as you said, and I've reached out to the joint office and cannot get an answer from them. I actually have one of my clients I'm not technical. He is and he's writing up like a white paper or whatever to like truly articulate what you explained, but in lots of detail. That I'm going to actually send on to the CTO, who I had a call with recently of joint office. So if you're listening, stay tuned for that to try to get an answer. I was not able to get an answer on that. We're seeing the states interpret that updated clarification differently, Chris. So it's not clear. Does it mean it has to support everything in between it, or can it just support one voltage level in there? So the short answer is on that part, FHWA think it's clear, but none of the rest of us think it's clear. So it's unclear. And so at one level, Tesla would not meet that, right? Because clearly they can only support it at the 500 volts level. And then on the what's the second part? The amperage, right? Oh yeah. And so when you take the 800 volt cars, like the Kias and the Hyundais and the Genesis and stuff like that, and try to charge it a supercharger, it ends up that they may only charge it like 100 kW, right? Which means they do not meet the 150 kW requirement of the NEVI program. So I've also reached out for this and no, we think you're wrong, right? But it's like, well, no, it doesn't. You can't charge these cars with a supercharger at 150, right? So they're clearly, what people have told me is, dare I say it, because I know the people there, but that they don't know what they're talking about. Right, like that they don't understand the technical aspects of this because Tesla doesn't support
and
the
something
minimum
I'll add,
requirements of NEVI.
something I'll add is a lot of people think that everybody on the governmental level has it together when it comes to the implementations of these systems, but I can tell you that states don't know how to interpret the federal guidelines, and the federal doesn't even know how to interpret the federal guidelines, because everybody's trying to figure this out. The reason I alluded to earlier, the reason that we don't have state contracts in Tennessee yet is because they're still working with federal communications, trying to get the clarifications on how those things communicate. And that's just something that the federal level doesn't understand.
As an awardee winner for these awards, you all are doing a great job, federal and state. Keep sending the money. You're all doing great.
Yeah, but it's something that it's so great on several of these topics that, West Virginia that we've spoken with, they don't understand, like they're trying to figure out how to get legislation to implement something new like NEVI, because it's never been done before.
Never been done
And
before.
you're
Yeah.
going to some of these states that they're trying their very best to figure out how to interpret this new grant, because it's never been done before, brand new bucket of funds. And it's something that the interpretation on voltages, all of these things, I think that there's so much unknown that there's got to be a lot of grace to the provider, a lot of grace to the states, and a lot of grace, well, to the federal who instituted it, more clarification coming forth, because there's way too many loopholes, gray holes, just like this voltage issue. My truck I use at the Tesla stations, I don't get 150 beyond 3 minutes into the charge, no matter what I do. And that's just like that's an issue that it may make sense when you submit something on an application, but actual implementation, it won't sign off depending on the vehicle you plug into it. So
yeah, and there's while some states are handing out significant number of awards to Tesla, there's one state that actually said they didn't qualify because of this issue that we're talking about. And I know Tesla actually submitted a request to basically have it overturned, but they were denied, as far as I know. So,
and that's all up to the states to determine how they interpret these federal guidelines, because every state is managing expectations differently. But there's the base expectations, and every state's doing the very best they can to figure out what that interpretation is, and that's something that we're currently studying. So, but yeah. Well, that lot to break down there. We're at the hour mark, so I think
it's cocktail time, guys. You know,
it's been
for you and I. It is. For Josh and Jesse, it's bedtime.
It's like dinner time. Yeah, I mean, it's bedtime. Yeah.
For Jesse, it's dinner time. For me, or for bedtime. For me, it's cocktail time.
Ouch.
But yeah,
now, Loren, is Loren going to be in Vegas? Are we going to see him in Vegas for ACT?
I will not be there, unfortunately.
We do get to see you next week, Loren.
I will be in Tennessee next week, though. However, so I get to plug. Well, actually, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but I will be keynoting the Tennessee Momentum Summit next Thursday in how do you say it? Murfreesboro?
Murfreesboro, yeah. It's Nashville. It's South Nashville, but yes.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah,
just to clarify, you have boroughs and you also have haulers, and these are different things, right?
Yeah, haulers is completely detached from the boroughs. You have to figure that one out. But yeah, Murfreesboro is just south of Nashville, and it's a town. That's awesome. If you go deep enough into the backwoods, you'll find the hauler that me and Jesse live in. So,
all right,
that's great.
Jesse, you're muted.
Hang a left at the big oak tree, then you got the big barn on the right. Make sure you hear the bees, and then you turn about 1.5 miles down the road where that dog keeps barking, and that gets you anywhere you want to go.
That is great.
Nice.
Tennessee at its finest. But it's been a pleasure to have you, Loren. Thank you so much for sharing your time to discuss this topic and some of the interesting news. I mean, there'll be more updates to come, and we hope to have you on again soon to discuss more things about charging infrastructure. So
sounds great. Thanks for having me.
And if you want more information on Loren, once again, go to EVAdoption.com. All of the information about his website, database, and all the stuff that he's doing is there. You can also follow him on LinkedIn, which a lot of people do. And there's some good tidbits of information that come off of his database for him on social media as well.
Some teasers. I try not to go too far. I'll upset people like you, my customers. Like, why are we paying for it when he's giving it out? So I try to.
The teaser is what hooked us into subscribing to your database.
And LinkedIn has been amazing for that. So anyway.
So are you a little bit like how Monroe will throw teasers of how they'll break down something, but then if you really want the book of deep diving, you buy that. And so you're doing that only with the EV charging?
All the data. Yep.
All the data.
That's probably fair. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't spend money on marketing. So it's all about LinkedIn and building the brand and throwing a little bit of a teaser out there. And then I get people like these guys here going, hey, we need some of that data.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Data is valuable no matter where you're at and what you have. So But all right, well, we'll catch you next week. Tune in next week for more EV news and updates. And for now, that's all.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Turn Down for What. Tune in next week for more EV news and updates. See you then.